You're 64 years old, you're married and retired, and you've accumulated $1.8 million in your 401k. And so you've got the question, should I consider taking some of this 401k money and converting it to Roth? That's what we're going to look at today. My name is John Vandergriff. I'm one of the owners and wealth planning team lead here at Blue Ridge Wealth Planners, where we help people make the transition into retirement effectively, and also if they're in retirement, make sure that they are planning for all the areas that they need to consider. And one of those very important areas is the thing that we call tax planning, which is where hopefully we can help people keep as much of the money that they've worked hard for and accumulated over their lifetime. And so as we look at this, we're going to look at an example here of that. And two things I always like to say right off the bat. First, if you like this content, watch the videos, obviously, like it, share it with other people, comment below. If you've got any feedback, we always appreciate that. And subscribe to our channel so that you can get more of the content that we release on a weekly basis. And so that being said, we're going to look at a very specific situation today, and so I always recommend before you act on any of the things that we look at, make sure that you have all the facts that you have about your situation from a CPA or whoever you do your taxes with. Again, we work hand in hand with our client CPAs whenever we're looking to consider some of these things. You may have a totally different situation than what we're going to cover today. So again, this is meant to educate you, but also like to throw that out there. So 64-year-old married couple, both retired in this situation with $1.8 million in 401k monies. The question is, should they convert to a Roth? And like we said, when it comes to retirement, there are really 5 areas that need to be considered. Taxes are one that doesn't get planned for very often in most financial advising relationships, but we need to have an income plan. We need to have a plan for investments, taxes, how those things impact healthcare, and then family and legacy. And what you tend to see the more you go into this conversation is how interconnected these things are to each other. So where we're going to focus on today is really taxes and the bridge between it and income, but we need to be aware that really one move in one of these areas could have an impact on everything else. So as we dig in a little deeper, this is a married couple, one spouse 64, the other 62. They currently have a $60,000 income need. And so you say, well, gosh, why is it so low compared to their asset base? Well, sometimes that's the reason why people accumulate so much money, is they have a low need from it and they save the rest. So as we look at this, the way they're making that up today is they've got $15,000 of income now. The rest of this they're supporting from their portfolio. And again, I would recommend they take that from their 401k based on where taxes are now, trying to help in this conversation of dwindling that bucket down. And then as we see here, they have $44,000 of combined Social Security once they reach full retirement age. So they're not currently taking Social Security. All of their income is taxable, so this full $60,000 would be taxable today. And as we said, $1.8 million coming from or in their 401k, another $300,000 in the bank. So when we look at this, and specifically when we start talking about Roth conversions, we need to understand what goes into that. So obviously this conversion is moving money from a tax-deferred IRA, 401k, wherever your retirement monies are, into this Roth position, and that is a taxable event. Now, a Roth needs to be in place for 5 years before whatever money starts it, or contributions are completely tax-free as far as the growth that they've had. With Roth conversions, we've got to be aware of when we do that, because if you're under 59 and a half, you start a 5-year clock where you would actually have a penalty on it, even if you exceeded 59 and a half. But if you're over the age of 59 and a half when you do this conversion, which is where this couple is, the principal that you convert would be available during that 5-year period, but the growth on that converted amount would be taxable to you if you took more than what you converted out. So very important for us to understand this is a taxable event. So we've got to factor that into the plans that we look at, but also the overall big picture. So as we start to zoom in on this, and I like to make this as big as we need it to be, this couple has a $60,000 income need. Today, they've got $15,000 of pension income. As we said, almost $45,000 of Social Security will be added to the bucket later. but they've got to supplement this income with $45,000 from their investments, which by percentage is not a big problem. It's a little over 2% that they would need to pull out of their investment net worth. But as we said, we would recommend in this case taking that out of the pre-tax buckets today, and you'll see why when we talk about tax brackets. But if their current income is $60,000 of taxable money, their top tax rate today is 12%. And so we see pre-tax money at 1.8, after tax at 300. No money's currently in either Roth accounts or properly structured life insurance, which are the only truly tax-free buckets that are available today. So as we look at this, the goal for this family is not much different than a lot that we talk to. It's how do we start to migrate from a very tax-heavy position in the pre-tax down to hopefully getting as much money in a tax-free bucket as possible. So when we have this discussion, and again, I like to use this example because it is, I think, the best way to illustrate what we're talking about here, because it's good round numbers. We have the ability to examine this a little further, but what we've got to look at is whether a Roth makes sense to do today or not. Because again, it doesn't make sense for everybody. It could for most people, but we've got to make sure that that makes the most sense for you as an individual or whoever we're talking to. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this example. The first part of this is if we choose to do nothing and we leave, in this case, $100,000, it could easily be $1 million or whatever your number is, into the IRA, versus if we take that same $100,000 and we move it into a Roth. What happens? What does this look like? How does things play out depending on circumstances now and in the future? So no matter what the tax brackets are today, if you choose to do nothing, there is no tax impact because the IRA 401k will continue to grow tax deferred. So you've got $100,000 here. The Roth will incur taxes based on the tax environment when this conversion happens. So let's assume taxes were 20%. Again, we've got a good round number here, $80,000. And so sometimes when I talk to people or even financial advisors, they'll stop and say, this is why I don't want to do a Roth, because if the market goes up this year, this account's going to get bigger than this account, which is true. That's just math. But as we look at it, we're not looking at the same buckets of money because this is fully taxable growth. This, as long as it's in place for 5 years, is fully tax-free growth. So we've got to see what impact that has at the end of the line, not just at the beginning. So again, if we double the values, this takes care of returns, time value money, inflation, to where we can truly focus on the tax conversation here. So as we look at this, IRA is worth $200, Roth is worth $160. The people that didn't think the Roth was a good idea at the beginning are saying, yep, you're proving my point here, until we go to take the money out. And that's where it really matters, because that's when it starts to impact your life. So the Roth account, we know, is worth $160,000 no matter what. Again, as we said, as long as it's been over 5 years, completely tax-free to you. The IRA depends on what the tax environment is when you go to take this money out. Now, what's interesting is if the numbers are the exact same, 20% at the end as they were at the beginning, you will notice bottom line numbers are exactly the same in this situation. So again, as we look at this, it doesn't really matter which decision you make in this scenario because the taxes are the same. Now, the way we've been told to plan for retirement is we need to defer all our taxes until a retirement period so that when we show a lower income, we will pay lower taxes, which makes sense, but no one has ever promised you if your income goes down, you will pay a lower percentage of it to the government. We just assume that. But if that did happen and your tax percentage went down, you would actually be better off at the end of the day by having the money stay in the IRA 401k instead of getting tax-free growth on this bucket, because the cost of entry is a lot higher than the exit point would be. Now, a lot of things that are going on today, I think, are going to cause taxes for most of the people that we're talking to, probably most of you that are listening, taxes to go up. It's a combination of many years of overspending in Washington that has accumulated, at this point, $31 trillion in debt. And again, when we know this, the only way to take care of debt is to pay it. So as we look at it, that's going to have a bottom line impact. If the tax percentage goes up, you have less money, $140,000 versus $160,000, and that's the concern and why this tax planning discussion is so important. We want to make sure that we help people find the time that they can legally pay the lowest percentage tax without knowing when the taxes are going to change necessarily, or also how much of an impact that change will have on you. That's unfortunately predicting the future, and we don't have that capability. So instead of just wondering, we're going to use history as a guide, also information today, to look and see what kind of situation we're looking at. So this is 2023 tax brackets with the standard deduction factored in. So again, as we look at this, the 12% bracket really tops out somewhere around $90,000, but when you add standard deduction to it, $117,000. With this couple having $60,000 of income, they would go into the 12% bracket as it is today with their top dollar of money if we're considering a conversion. Now, if we compare this, 2017, you say, well, why is that a number that matters? Well, the tax code that we have today is set to expire in the year 2026. If nothing changes, that would be the way the brackets, and then these numbers have been adjusted for inflation to show, in 2023 dollars, what would be the 2017 tax brackets. And so again, for this couple, their top dollar would jump from 12% to 15%. Now, some people say, oh, that's just 3%. Well, that's $3,000 of extra taxes for every $100,000 of tax deferred money that you have. So depending on how much money you have, it adds up. But for me, I would much rather pay $3,000 less taxes if I could. So now, the last time that we had noticeably higher taxes than what we've come to expect over the last really 3 to 4 decades was the year 1981. As you notice, the top tax bracket this year was 70% compared to a top bracket of 39.6 or 37% as it is today. So noticeably higher, especially the higher the income goes. But even on lower levels of income, we still have a increase. We go from 15% on that last page to 16%. And then again, as you progress up through the brackets, you will start to have a bigger impact. Now, what's interesting with this case, and where we want to look at both the numbers today, but also the numbers in the future, this couple has $1.8 million, and if we assume that bucket just stays the same, it makes 2.5% to be very conservative, it covers all the income they're taking out of it until they get to full retirement age, they really don't have an income need off this money anymore. And so let's assume that for the next 7 years after that, between their age 66 and the RMD age at 73, they are able to make a 5% growth on this money. This $1.8 million balloons up to $2.5 million because they're really not needing it. All their income needs are taken care of, or most of them are. And so as we look at this, if they get on the doorstep of RMDs, they've not done any conversions with this money, they're going to be forced to take out a little less than 4%, or exactly $95,576 of income that they really don't need. They're just going to be forced to take it out at that time at whatever the tax environment looks like. So if they have $95,000 on top of the 15 of pensions and then the roughly 45 of Social Security, you start to see that they are going to have an issue where they're pushing up above $150,000 of taxable income. So RMDs have a huge deal that we need to be aware of. You may not need this money now, but you're going to be forced to take it out once you reach the age of 73, and then the legislation in place says 10 years from now that number will jump to 75. But again, 10 years is a long time when it comes to government legislation. So as we look at this, we need to see the impact. So what we're looking at here is where this conversation would be today, but then also if we factored in the future where RMDs would be with these brackets and the information we know. Again, what are we looking at from a tax picture? So right now, if they were able to stay at $60,000 of income, for the rest of their life, and obviously adjusted for inflation, they would have 12% that they would make a decision on today as their starting point. That would be 15 in 2017, or as we said, 2017, 2026. And then 1981's brackets at 16%, so not a noticeable change there, but look at the impact that RMDs have. So 22% is where that roughly $150,000 of taxable income would be now. 25% would be the starting place in the next tax code if that's where we go to. And then as we look at 1981's numbers, jumps all the way up to 37%. So again, by having to take that money out at a time where they don't really have a choice not to, they're going to have a noticeable impact to the amount of money they're keeping out of the scenario, which means we've got to look at this and say, we know this is going to happen as long as these people live long enough, okay? So I would assume that the decisions that we need to make with taxes don't just look at today's numbers, but also need to consider this as well in that conversation. So when we look at this, you say, how much do we need to convert? Well, we want to fully maximize the 12% tax bracket. I think 22% makes sense because, again, that's where this couple will probably be at later. And then 24%, all of these tax percentages are lower than the 25% bracket of 2017, definitely lower than the 37% bracket. So I think doing this and maxing this out would allow them to convert a little over $300,000 with an effective tax rate of conversion when you add these together of 21.3%. So again, a good percentage there. Now, as we look at this, we've got to consider the impact that a income increase this large has on anybody the age of 63 and higher. This is where we have to factor in what most people call IRMA, but the impact to your income increasing and the effect that it has on Medicare Part B and D costs. So as we look at this, these are the income thresholds today. If we took that couple to a little over $390,000 of income, they would have an increase of about $10,000 on their Medicare cost. And really for this particular couple, it wouldn't be that high because the 62-year-old doesn't factor into this conversation yet. It would really just be about half this number. But let's be conservative. Let's add that $10,000 to this. What that ends up doing is it takes the total cost of this conversion to right at 23.8%. Now, I'm not excellent at math. I did the math beforehand. So as we look at this, 23.8 is really the cost of conversion when we factor in these Medicare increases that one of these spouses would have, and really that number is going to be probably top of the 22%, bottom of the 23s if we cut it in half. So as we look at this, we've got to factor in a lot of things into this discussion. And what I always tell people, if you've not had at least this much of a discussion with your financial advisor, they're probably not going to ever talk to you about tax planning. And that's not saying they're bad, it's just they're not covering that. So we feel like this is a shortfall for a lot of the people that we talk to. And so if you've not had this discussion, you would like to, you're going to see in our comments here, or right above that in the information on our post today, a link to our calendar where you can schedule a time to talk to us about this conversation, how it pertains to you, your situation, and what type of decisions you need to be considering when it comes to your own tax position, and hopefully keeping as much of the money as you've accumulated as possible. So as we said, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully this was a good use of your time. As we said, write down any questions in the comments that you have. Share this with other people. We're trying to get this out here and share this with as many people as possible, but hopefully this was of value to you today, and you can see kind of the impact that taxes can have on your savings, how that can start to affect other places, but also putting a plan together for those things really helps you have a leg up on where most people are sitting today. So look forward to sharing more content with you in the future, but that's all we have for today. Thank you for joining us.